Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever you're watching this. I am having the pleasure of interviewing Logan Moody. He is a former coworker, extremely bright individual, one of the most articulate people I've ever met, and he has definitely challenged me on quite a few different tasks and had me have the ability to think again. So, Logan, how you doing today?
Doing good, Will. Thanks for having me on.
I appreciate it, man. It's been a long time since I've seen you. You said about 6 months?
Yeah, we went to Symphony about 6 months ago and enjoyed the Canadian brass actually back then.
Yeah.
One of my favorite brass groups I actually got to see in person with you here in Billings, so it was a good time.
They were pretty phenomenal. It
Yeah.
was just like they put on a great show too.
Oh, yeah.
It was more than just the music. It was more of the banter between each other, like between the how would you call them? The people that like play together.
Yeah, it was a brass quintet, so five of them. There's trombone, French horn, two trumpets, and a tuba, I think.
Yeah.
They were they're a very well-knit brass group. Like each of them is top of the line of their specific instrument. So like me as a trumpet player, I can really respect that, because those two trumpet players that are in it, they really have to compete with a lot of other people who are trying to get into this, world-renowned brass group. So it's pretty incredible to see.
When a person is of that level of caliber, could they just take another person and replace them, or does it have to be able to vibe well with the other individuals?
I think a lot of it would come into the team aspect of it too. There's probably some camaraderie they build over the years, and usually if you're in the Canadian brass, it's a longer term stint of time, like you're not going to be there just a few years. Some people stay there, up until they retire from music or, they might be in the Canadian brass while they're also playing in a symphony or something like that. So, um, yeah, it tends to not change as frequently.
That's pretty impressive. Like, I know that you have told me you played before. You played in the city band.
Yeah.
How long have you been playing for?
Yeah, I started playing trumpet when I was 7 years old, so about 20 years total, but like there's been time periods in there where I didn't practice as much, didn't play as frequently. So, like I think in middle school there was a lull of actually picking my trumpet, playing it. High school as well wasn't as much. College I did play in marching band,
Hmm.
even though, I got a civil engineering degree, so that doesn't, relate with playing music in college at all, but it was just fun for the experience side of it, playing in marching band. And then, yeah, since college, since working as an engineer, I've just found it really cool to be a part of a city band where I can just play with a bunch of other folks wanting to keep making music, but it's not paid or anything, so it's just what people love to do, I think, at that point.
So, do you find that it's one of the better ways to help you de-stress?
Yeah, I would say, music, city band, running. I do a lot of distance running, so training for that is also probably a big time commitment of myself. Being involved at the church I attend here, just the various activities there, of course, Sunday, and then maybe some Bible studies that come up too. So I feel like we'll talk about the injury that I had 6 years ago, but almost just like the different communities that I've been able to be involved with have maybe been like uniquely helpful for recovering from a TBI, but then really being able to feel like I'm involved and part of different communities.
Hmm. Yeah, I do want to explore this before we jump into your childhood, but
Yeah.
did you feel like you would be excluded from a TBI, or do you did you feel like there was any type of hesitation about your limits after you started to do your recovery?
Yeah, so I mean, the recovery is a big story itself. I mean, it's recovering from a TBI takes a while. It's not like recovering from a broken arm or something like that, because the brain is just such a complex organ of the body. It's by far the most complex organ of the human body. And so recovering from a TBI is very specific to the individual because no two individuals are going to have the same kind of recovery. No two TBIs are the same. So it's just such a individual kind of journey that people go through. So by no means would I expect like another person to have the same outcome as me or the same path as I did in recovery, but like everyone can find their own unique path, their own like ways in which they can work through challenges as they come up in recovering from a TBI.
Well, tell me a little bit about your childhood, because I definitely want to explore this TBI with you.
Oh yeah, so my childhood, so I had the TBI at age 21, so a lot of time, prior to then, I grew up in Bozeman, Montana. Originally both mom and dad are in the house, so up until the age of 11, it was a pretty, I want to say like standard, like American family growing up experience. Um, let's see, young age, I was really into pretty much, any kind of hands-on workshop actually kind of experience. So like my dad was actually probably most influential. I don't think he realized it at the time, but he was probably very influential in terms of helping to cultivate that skill, just very hands-on, very good at building things in his workshop, and he eventually kind of gave me my own workshop in the garage. But I probably actually started using power tools originally with him helping me at probably the age of 4 or so. So very young, like most parents would not let their kids use power tools at the age of 4. Um, I think he pretty soon, like, quickly realized that I was maybe more adept, able to use them responsibly, and so eventually I would just be kind of building stuff out of wood, in our garage, very, as a child, and I think that was what kind of put me on the early trajectory to want to do engineering later in college.
Hmm.
Um, so, I mean, that was honestly a big, I think, just significant thing in my childhood there that maybe most people couldn't relate with being that young, but kind of unique for me. I have two younger siblings. So I'm the oldest of three. I have a younger sister. She's 2 years younger than me. I have a brother who's 6 years younger than me. And I want to say that they kind of had their own unique gifts as well. That, because we were homeschooled up until I was 11 years old, it was a kind of a different education kind of environment. Like it wasn't the standard, classroom type setting where most kids are these days. It's, homeschooling can kind of be what almost the parents want it to be,
Mhm.
which can be good and bad. I think there were pros to it and cons that it had. Of course, like I was behind with my reading and probably my social skills as well, to where when I did have to start school in the 6th grade, um, it did make like social interactions and just a level of coursework were more difficult
Hmm.
because in homeschooling we didn't maybe, like it's hard to have the classroom setting interacting with other kids, and it's hard, maybe to have my mom be as strict as a teacher would be.
Yeah, because it's definitely harder. Your mom has an emotional bias to you where
Mm,
she really cares, and
she very much so does, yeah.
if you're a kid and like you were hard, she was hard on you, then it would impact the rest of the life. Where it's not just only a teacher, but then also as a mentor, as a mother, and as all these different hats that she was playing. Or
Yeah.
and you said your dad left when you were, or they split when you were 11 years old.
Mhm.
Did you stay much in contact with your father?
Yeah, initially not very much. So both my parents are from California originally. Both of their families, my grandparents are still there. And, they moved to Bozeman, Montana, originally for college for my dad. He went to college there, and I went to college there actually later for civil engineering. But that's what brought them to Bozeman originally. They had me 2 years after living in Bozeman, and so I grew up in Bozeman. Montana is pretty much all I've ever known in terms of living here. But he originally moved back to California after they divorced.
Hmm.
There wasn't very much contact, if any, for probably 2 to 3 years. He eventually actually moved back to Bozeman. He still lives in Bozeman. And it was just a gradual process, I would say, of reincorporating contact with him and then visits with him and then just kind of a very gradual process of almost reconstructing a relationship with him as my father, because there was a lot of pain there that I had from him leaving, very much a feeling of betrayal that he had, skirted around all of his responsibilities as a husband and a father. And it took a while for me to really be able to fully forgive him. And I think even now there's probably things that I have to just continually remind myself of when I meet with him, when I'm tempted to kind of be disappointed with him. Um, because I want to keep building the relationship with him, keep having it as, an important relationship in my life because he is my father, of course. So
Yeah,
um, it's very much so an important relationship in any man's life, especially if their father's still living, which thankfully mine is. Um, so, it's been a long, I would say, journey since, age 11 to now. It's probably almost been just a constant, series of progression of improving my relationship with my dad, or just feeling almost like I've reached a new level of strength on my own where I can extend myself more into his life and really not be at any sort of point where I've ever like needed anything from him. I haven't wanted to kind of have to rely on him and then risk having him let me down. So I know that that's kind of probably a frequent thing that comes up, from people like myself, men like myself, whose fathers let them down. Um, Very much so, it's kind of a feeling of like not wanting to risk being hurt again.
it is. It's when we are worried or we're ambivalent or we are like kind of how to say not scared, but it's more of a wincing about what's going to happen. What is a person going to say? How are they going to react? Are they going to look at this as transactional?
Hmm.
And it sounds like it's a relationship that needs to get dive deeper into, where it's like you have all these parameters put up there, all these protection layers, and it makes it hard to be able to communicate when you guys are living inside a castle instead
Hmm.
of actually being able to converse in front of each other. There was something I was listening to when I was driving back from Grass Lodge last weekend, on the 4th of July weekend. And it was saying how men are fathers, not just bio fathers, but father figures in our life, where they're able to help us be able to understand social cues, be able to understand to be a little bit more fearless, but also how to understand what's happening in society. It was really fascinating the way that was broken down. And it's an area that when we don't have those best relationships with our fathers or mothers, of how it impacts us. And it doesn't mean that one person's like, it's also the way that we understand it, like how he left when you were 11 years old. So Logan at 11 has this protection measure. Logan at 27, 16 years later, is still also kind of looking at it through Logan as 11 years old. And we don't always have that type of dialogue of how we are, and we try to protect ourselves. So when we're at that certain stage of that trauma,
Hmm.
that's that's a huge trauma for you, and how these individual little traumas can come up, and then how we start to try to morph our world around it to be able to be protective of it.
Yeah, no, I can totally see that in myself when I look back on probably it's most visible to me when I think of who I was, probably like ages 11 to 13, just the first 2 years after my parents split, because the three of us kids lived with my mom entirely afterwards. So, I mean, in some ways, I think that was probably the best thing for us because she was and is a much more responsible parent.
Mm.
And had we had to have been split between them, I don't know how that would have worked. Um, just, because of distance and things like that, but also because of just my dad's really strong lack of responsibility. I could really see that even before they divorced, but then afterwards, he's struggled with a lot of things over the years. I probably won't get into all of them, but just it was hard for me to respect him for a while.
Hmm.
Just seeing all the ways he messed up and things like that, it's hard to.
It, and I'm not trying to give your dad an out, but I'm going to ask a question for you to think about.
Hmm.
It's we kind of will judge a person on their actions, and we'll have plenty more time to be able to see it. But if they have had their own traumas in their life of how they're behaving,
Yeah.
and how we would say, you know what, I was able to change, why weren't you? At the same time, a lot of people in his generation, they didn't have the capability of being able to always talk or be able to change and be able to have that voice. Like I shared this before, I said like how I wanted to become the man that I wish I had when I was a kid,
Hmm.
but now I'm working towards being the man that I wish my father had. And is how our parents, they're only able to provide us with the tools that they know and the resources that they have. And as a kid, we still want them to be better. We put a father up on a pedestal. Like the way that you conveyed about your father was, hey, you know what? You showed me how to work with power tools and I was gifted, but then you can also hear in the same breath, like, was my dad actually just being careless with 4-year-olds with a saw? And at the
Maybe.
but then you're also like, it was really great to be able to spend the bonding with him.
Oh yeah.
And my dad set me up with my own little like workplace to be able to work. And then also at the same time, it's like you can hear the differences of the perspectives of how you look at your father, but then
Hmm.
also the way that you speak about your mother is you have a lot of compassion, hold her in high regards. She did the best job that she possibly can do, and she continues to do that and
Hmm.
provides it. But that's why I think it's so important to talk about people's childhoods.
Yeah, and I like what you said about like trying to be the man you wish your dad had had. So you're trying to be kind of like the ideal grandfather for
Because
your dad.
yeah, it's so my grandfather, he used to take his frustration out on my dad. And my dad used to take it for his siblings. He
Hmm.
would actually take the beatings for the siblings. My great grandfather was very rough to my grandfather,
Hmm.
and they handed out very heavy hands. So it wasn't always a very kind way. And
Yeah.
the way that we are speaking, we are articulating how we are actually looking at it. Back then, it was more of the physical compliance. When like the Marine Corps has a saying, when the fun fails, the body must be punished. It's the same way. It's like the quickest way to compliance. And when we don't know how to handle our emotions, especially in my household or my old household, alcohol was used.
Hmm.
And we go to things that are tried and true and we emulate how our parents were.
Yeah.
So I'm working towards wishing I had my dad had a therapist or had a friend to be able to say, hey, Dennis, it's okay, man. It's, dude, you're in rough shape. Like, I was caught myself thinking about this. My buddy Eddie Bott, or my brother's buddy Eddie Bott, his father used to take me out fishing. And he would take me out fishing randomly, but it was just a really good time. And my father never had the desire to really spend time with his kids
Hmm.
when I was younger, and it it shaped his void. Like I think about how I was gifted the opportunity to be a godfather to my buddy Nick's kid, and I'm like, how do I be around kids? I'm like, I see always on TV, guys are predators when they're around kids, and I'm like, I am not a predator, and I never want to give that
Yeah.
type of inkling out there.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I do what a lot of people do. We avoid it. We avoid the situation because we don't know how to interact. And I look at it and I had that epiphany the other night and I was like, oh, I can be around kids. It was just my father didn't show me how to role model this.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I like a lot of what you said there. Just, I look back on my father and my grandfather, his dad, and then my great grandfather, who was his dad, and like it sounds similar to your family tree because there was a lot of just I don't want to say like complete hostility, but just a very rough environment in which all of these men were raised, from what I've heard about them or seen, like from my grandfather or from my dad. So yeah, it's only, God's grace that I would be able to change that, at this point, and yeah, really be able to hopefully learn from their mistakes, right? I feel like that's a major advantage one can have is if you see mistakes that your loved ones have made or friends have made, try to learn from them and not make them yourself.
Yeah. It's easy to see a mistake. It's easy to recognize a mistake. The hard part is carving out that new way of thinking.
Hmm.
And it's hard to really pretty much take the metaphor machete or the chainsaw and start carving out a new path because our brain has those neural pathways that is just, I like predictability. I want to go on autopilot.
Hmm.
Our brain is always fighting to go on autopilot. But now we're actually trying to change it. We're constantly being in the present. We're constantly reevaluating, and it's stressful and it's tiresome. And our body wants to say, I just want to be on autopilot.
Yeah.
So we can see their mistakes, but having the resiliency or the courage to continue to try and explore new things and be able to expand it. Like I was sharing with you before we jumped on, is one of the reasons I actually want to do this is because I genuinely believe people like men's mental health really means a lot to me. And it's not talked about enough, I feel like. And the other aspect to it is that how many guys have the courage to be able to share stories where we say, "Oh, this is nothing. This is very trivial. We're going to suck it up and move on." It's the problem with it is almost like carrying around ankle weights with you. It's like 5 pounds doesn't feel much when you're rested, and then all of a sudden we go throughout the whole day. Those 5 pounds add up real quick. And if we're able to start understanding where we can actually take those ankle weights off and then be able to move correctly, but all that stress and all that suffering helped us grow into being stronger, faster. But we also have to understand how to let go of those traumas, even if they were gifted us that we didn't want that gift.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much there of like, trauma and not only the trauma from like my childhood, and it sounds like you had a difficult childhood as well, maybe in different ways, but it sounds pretty similar to mine. Um, and like, then there's the other side of men's mental health, like a TBI injury or other more acute injuries like that that can really set people back suddenly, and it kind of throws a whole new wrench into the gears, that you have to rebuild from. So,
Like a TBI is no joke. When you get hit, when you stop, so like it stops all your forward momentum.
yeah.
It reverts you back. You, but you know what? This is your story. I want to hear more about your perspective on this.
Yeah, so for sure. I was 21 when I had my TBI. It was a complete freak accident. So it's common for people to get TBIs like from car accidents or firearm injuries, accidents with firearm, but mine was a ladder related accident. So I fell off of a ladder while cleaning gutters on the second story level. I'd been up on the roof for about an hour. When you clean the gutters, at least I used to do it the way where I'd climb up with a garden hose, clean out all the gutters with the hose, and then come down off the roof. And I'd done it a bunch of times before, and so I think I just was not paying enough attention. You know, Going from the roof, getting back onto the ladder, something happened to where the ladder slid out from underneath me. I was not expecting it, so I fell backwards off the roof, landed on the driveway. So it was like a very hard surface. Um, you know, I landed very poorly on my back, and so it was like instant. I was out. I fractured my spine in one location. I fractured my skull in multiple locations, and thankfully my brother was close by, so he ran over to the neighbor, had them call 911, and my mom actually lives pretty close to the hospital, so the ambulance was there in probably 5 minutes or something like that. So the response was really good. Um, like the neighbor came over and was there with me before the ambulance was even there. So The response was quick, I guess medical response. Pretty soon at the hospital in Bozeman, they realized that I would need some neurosurgery, and so they flew me actually out here to Billings from Bozeman on a helicopter. And so I have technically been in a helicopter before, but no memory of it. And when I woke up in Billings, actually, after being in a coma for 2.5 weeks, they asked me where I thought I was, and I still thought that I was in Bozeman because I had no idea that they had moved me. And so I learned later that they'd flown me to Billings. Um, but it was a long recovery from that kind of an injury. And of course, when they put you into a induced coma like that they don't really know actually what you'll be like when you wake up, or what kind of memory you may have lost, or you could be almost a completely different person. So, of course, during that time, all of these doctors were kind of telling my mom, telling my family all of these things like, Logan might not remember you when he wakes up. He might be a completely different person. He might be unable to speak. Like, he could be completely mentally disabled. So they were told a lot of things like that during that time. And if anything, I kind of almost think they had a uniquely different and difficult side of the story, because putting myself in their shoes, I would be very uh, despondent, perhaps, might be a correct word, or just, I would completely not know what to expect hearing those kinds of things from doctors. And they really just prayed nonstop during those 17 days when I was out. Um, you know, the church I was a part of in Bozeman, they still go there in Bozeman. I go there when I visit them, but a lot of people in that church are praying for me, and my family, of course, were. And so, from my end, it was, a complete miracle that God worked, healing me like that, allowing me to have a complete recovery, actually, which none of the doctors were really that optimistic. Even when I woke up and remembered my family and like recognized them and everything, um, they were still, I would say, kind of hesitant to be optimistic, because, of course, they don't want to like give people too lofty of expectations that then won't happen. So, like I remember when I did wake up, I was in the like initial ICU in one of the hospitals here in Billings for about 5-ish days. They were still kind of monitoring me, everything like that. After I was improving, they were pretty confident I was improved enough. They transferred me to kind of an outpatient, more rehab kind of hospital here in Billings. So it was at that point where they started having me like, try to walk again and almost relearn everything like that. And it is a crazy experience to have to like I didn't ever have to like relearn how to walk, I wouldn't say, because I remembered what it was like, but if you haven't walked for 3 weeks, at that point it had been about 3 weeks since the accident to when they tried putting me on my feet again. Like so much muscle had atrophied, so much coordination had been lost, to where at first, like the first 2 days, I was able to stand up for maybe like 5 or 10 seconds, just like standing on my feet, not even balancing fully, like people kind of holding me up. And then my blood pressure would get too low because my body was so accustomed to being horizontal. Like, you're almost to the point of passing out just standing up. And so they have you sit down and you come back, a day later, try to do a little bit more. And so it's a very gradual process of being able to stand on your own, then kind of walk with a walker, then walk with a cane, then walk on your own, on your feet, but having people next to you in case you stumble or anything like that. So it was about 2 weeks in that rehab hospital. And then I did reach a point where I was, balancing better, better able to walk, more confident going upstairs and things like that. So at that point they realized, okay, you can go home now. But
Get out of the hospital.
yeah, and it felt so great to leave the hospital and go home after about a month of being in a hospital, because it feels like so much longer than that. Because in a hospital, there's like nothing to do.
Hmm.
You're just in bed the whole day, and it can feel like an eternity. Like a few days in a hospital can feel like an eternity. So, um, that was kind of the initial recovery. I got to a point where I was actually able to go back to college that fall, which the injury was in mid-June, and then college started kind of late August. So it's kind of crazy, but I was able to go back part-time to college again just about 10 weeks after the injury. So again, the doctors were not thinking that something like that could happen, but I did feel strong enough at that point to be able to go back and do just two classes in the fall. And I think when I look back on some periods of my recovery, I think I was a little too impatient with myself.
You
And
being impatient.
I think I was actually pushing myself too hard at sometimes because, not that I shouldn't have tried to go back to college and be optimistic about my recovery, but I did have a setback about 4 months after the injury. There was another kind of almost, they call it like a contra coup, where if your head slams into something, the initial injury is on the side of your head that hits the surface. So in my case, it was the back of my head, and they initially operated on the back of my head and back of my brain because that's where all the initial bleeding was, that's where all the fractures were and everything. So that's where they had initially fixed, but the other side of your brain actually does get injured as well because the ground forces your brain into the opposite side of your skull. And so actually the front of my brain gradually had issues with bleeding.
Hmm.
And so they had to give me a second surgery to remove hematomas, is what they're called. It's essentially like a large blood clot that forms on the surface of the brain under the dura, under the kind of covering of the brain. So it's very irritating to your brain. After a while, it'll be problematic and it won't really resolve on its own. So at a certain point, they do have to, operate, remove all the blood, clot, and everything. So that was the biggest setback I had in my injury. I don't know if I had been kind of more patient with myself the first 2 to 3 months. I may have been able to avoid that happening. Um, like if I had avoided exercise and kind of the more intense things I got back to doing too soon, unfortunately, I may have been able to avoid that. But thankfully, that wasn't, a big setback, but it did make it to where I had to come back to Billings, go through another neurosurgery. Um, and I would say actually there I did experience more negative effects after that surgery actually, because the initial surgery I was in an induced coma for like 16 days after that,
Jeez.
after the surgery, and so I was healing a lot during those 16 days. I didn't have to experience that. But when they wake you up immediately after a surgery and you're having to go through kind of all of the pain. There was a lot of pain that
Hmm.
I experienced after that second surgery that I actually didn't experience the first time because I was completely out the whole time. Um, so, like, especially with all the swelling that happens kind of days 2 to 5
Hmm.
after a surgery, um, I did have a few seizures that happened during that time. So, again, it was kind of something I didn't have to experience, thankfully, after the first surgery, but the second surgery, I think a lot of the swelling and just overall irritation that my brain was going through at the time, it did cause it to have some seizures that were very just uncomfortable to go through on my end.
Yeah.
And again, actually, probably the worst thing about the seizure was because I was conscious during it. I got very frustrated with myself because I'm like, you have to be able to control your brain, but somehow your brain is losing, like, you're losing control of your brain basically. And then I see my mom kind of freaking out because she thinks, maybe this will completely damage him or something. So again, that was kind of traumatic seeing my mom be that upset or
Yeah. It sounds like you
in
keep one.
angst.
It's like the similar theme is that you want to protect your mom.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, So that was a tough aspect of the seizures, and I mean, thankfully after four, I had four of them total. Thankfully after that, I didn't have any more. It was pretty much related to just the trauma that my brain had gone through, and eventually I was actually able to get completely off of all medications that they'd put me on,
Hmm.
and just kind of actually reach a point of complete recovery from that injury. That's of course going out like I would say 2 years after the injury, where I would say I reached a point of doing everything I had done before, or being capable of doing everything I'd done before. Like some things like backcountry skiing, I probably won't ever do that again just because of the potential to give myself a bad concussion or another TBI. It's just really something I don't want to have happen again. So, as fun as backcountry skiing is, or like maybe rock climbing is fun too, but it's just not something I see as worth it at this point.
Gotcha. It's
Yeah,
being more risk averse and
yeah.
being more conscious to the ramifications.
Hmm.
Like, have you noticed a switch, or do you notice like when you were a kid? I know we was talking about this, but you said you're introverted.
Hmm.
Did you notice like because you said the front side of your brain was operated on the second time?
Yeah.
Did you notice that your emotions to people change at all? Because the reason I asked that
Yeah.
is because that's where your limbic area is, and that's usually where you're more of your emotional area of your brain. Like that's where your emotions are. And
So it's interesting because I would say that actually one of the medications they put me on, I could so accurately predict that it would make me almost not paranoid, but like it would make me I was just overall a lot more pessimistic of the future. For some reason, I don't know why, but it's an anti-seizure medication and it was effective at preventing my brain from going into a seizure. And a seizure is essentially like your neurons firing way too quickly. It's kind of like a computer when it is over computing and it crashes. Um, kind of a similar concept with the brain, but the seizure medication works in that it limits how fast your brain can work. And so something about that medication dramatically negatively impacted me, and just not in the sense of like I don't wish I'd taken it or anything, because I think it was effective for a time, helping me to recover and things like that. But when I was able to get off of it for about, because I was on it for about a year and a half after the injury, I did notice a lot of improvement in my overall mood being able to get off of it.
the, so I know that you said that the second one actually bothered you the most. Were
Hmm.
you still in college while that second one happened?
I was, so it was about 4 months after the injury. It was actually midway through that first semester back in school,
Yeah,
and remarkably, I was able to still like complete my classes,
I'm not surprised.
even. But I'm surprised looking back on it because this was prior to COVID. Like they weren't, super lenient or anything.
Oh, so
Um,
I'm just saying to the people here, I've actually had some great conversations with him, and the way that he thinks is mind-boggling about how he computes the information. And it's a positive way I'm saying
okay.
it. It's not a bad thing at all. It's a highly amount of respect.
Thank you.
It's the recall, and I was honestly surprised when you started talking about how you weren't an avid reader when you were a kid, because I'm like, that's shocking. When as soon as you found out
Yeah.
about Libby, you were like, "Ooh, I'm going to start downloading some
Yeah.
books."
No, I became an avid reader. I actually wasn't really reading that much prior to age 10, so very much so behind. Um, I was blessed that I was able to be homeschooled,
Hmm.
because I had kind of a unique educational experience, but dyslexia was something I dealt with for a few years, like kind of the ages 5 to 10. It just took me a lot longer to learn how to read
Hmm.
and to be confident with reading. And so I think if I had been in school where they expect you to kind of be at a very regimented pace of keeping up with everyone else, I think that would have been an overall discouraging experience and could have negatively impacted me. So I actually probably was about the age of 10 when I started being able to read well, and but it was kind of the case where I was able to read and then really started enjoying it and just doing a lot more of it. So,
If I remember correctly, it was either Angela Duckworth, Malcolm Gladwell, or Adam Grant, but there was a part that they were talking about. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but they were saying a person born with dyslexia and they overcome it, they actually are really gifted. And
okay.
you're like, well, what, you don't really want to wish that upon somebody,
Yeah.
but it's the resiliency and it's the grit factor. And it's the way that you're able to look at things from a multitude of angles. Where, for instance, like I can say the ABCs backwards, or I can actually do my whole social security number backwards. I can, when I look at something forward, I look at it backwards as well.
Okay.
And that's how my brain works. But it took me a while. But the resiliency and the grit that you had might have also played a huge impact on the way that you're able to recover quickly because
Yeah.
having that type of determination where it's easy to start wanting to give up on yourself. Like I had my Achilles reattached almost 2 years ago, and I couldn't touch the ground for I think it was 6 weeks. As soon as my right foot touched the ground, I just felt the burning, like sharp, like
Mm,
electric pain going through my foot because those pain receptors were not actually being like touched before
okay.
for a long time, and it just hurt.
Just standing on your foot?
Just touching the
Wow.
ground
Okay.
actually hurt, but because it atrophied a lot. And the reason I'm sharing that is because like your way of actually getting back up, or you trying to use your brain in the correct way, or the way that you're analyzing it and trying to get back into college, where there's so many people that might have had the same type of severity, might have heavily impacted them, where they wouldn't
Mm,
have been like, hey, I'm just going to get back up on this horse and
yeah.
I'm going to just keep just chugging along.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally just the grace of God that He would give me not only the ability to kind of recover like that, but also the willpower, the discipline to be able to keep pushing through when things get hard. Because there's a lot of times I can think back on this just very discouraging in the recovery process. Um, like the setback I talked about, having to come back to Billings, go through another brain surgery, and then, all the uncertainty even after that, because it was probably, a couple months after that second surgery, they were a little uncertain of like, are we going to have to do something like that again? Or, like just things like that that were discouraging thoughts for me,
Yeah.
because of course I did not want to have to go through something like that again. Um, so yeah, it's completely God's grace that, He'd give me both the health to be able to come through something like that to recover, but then also like the family around me, the friends, the church family, just really encouraging me. And like I think of a lot of my friends who I used to do very active kind of activities like hiking or skiing with them, but they'd come over and visit me at my mom's house, because I wasn't able to get out with them, but they still wanted to see me, and so it was very much so valuable to have people in my life who just loved me for who I am, not because I did just this specific activity with them, but just
Mhm.
that they love me as a person, and it really helps so much to be able to see that, feel their love coming from them, and just that does give a lot of strength to someone with going through difficulty.
So now I'm going to pry a little bit.
Okay.
Do you believe, or do you remember when you were kind of alone in those situations? Because obviously you were living with your mother, but you're alone mentally in your head.
Mhm.
Did it ever actually bring you to any some dark times?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that there were like the depression was really something I dealt with during the recovery, but actually prior to the injury, actually like my teenage years, depression was something that I struggled with, not because of like a TBI or anything, but I want to say it was because at the time of just a lot of pain with the divorce my parents had been through, pain of feeling like my dad had betrayed me, betrayed my family. Um, I was a pretty angry person, an angry teenager for a couple of years after that. And, I really think back to around the age of 13 when I kind of realized my own, like I could see, I was very good at seeing the ways my dad had messed up and kind of putting all the blame on him or putting all the blame on other people in my life, like grandparents or the people who hadn't really made things any better for me or for my mom. But um, it was kind of at the age of 13 where I want to say it was kind of just God almost helped me to see my own uh, sin is what the term for it would be, but like my own the ways in which I had messed up as well. Um, and it was kind of at that point where I realized, okay, I think I can trust God and what He's doing, because I can see, there were a lot of ways in which He provided for me and my family. Like, we never had to really worry about, losing my mom's house, for example, or kind of the financial insecurity that definitely, probably usually would come with a divorce like that. Thankfully, my mom's parents were very generous, providing for her during a few years there.
It,
Um,
what I hear is like your rational brain comes
yeah.
up in here when you start talking about being angry as a 13-year-old,
Hmm.
being depressed, and then you just went into the whole rational brain where it was like, hey, at least we didn't have to do this. At least we didn't have to do that. The
Uh-huh.
comparative suffering
Mm.
is what I sometimes I'll talk about. Where the other aspect of it is, and I don't think we actually give enough understanding to our younger self. Like I was talking about how you were when you were 11 compared to you're 27, 16 years difference. Like how the different components or the different parts of our life of how we look at things. And then what we'll do is that we'll say, oh, well, these other people have it worse. And then, or this is what it is.
Uh-huh.
And we never actually acknowledge those, or I don't say never, but we don't acknowledge the feelings that we had when we were trapped in these certain components. And I will say from my own mental health journey was when we actually go back to those times and release those emotions from the memories, then we have more emotional bandwidth. We also don't have as much stress. And we can be able to acknowledge that, hey, this is what it was. It wasn't just that. And like, thank God we didn't lose the house. And I'm not looking for you to actually be stuck there. I'm just saying, like, sometimes what we'll do is just we'll fast forward when things get
Mhm.
a little bit difficult.
Yeah, I can see that perhaps in just myself when I think back to kind of almost different eras of my life. It's kind of like I'd rather just kind of brush over that era and forget about it and just be able to move on. But it sounds like you're saying that it's helpful to be able to empathize with what I was experiencing at that time, because at the time it was very tough.
Because, like, if you empathize with your old self, if that actually comes up, and the reason I'll use it like an analogy for you to understand. So, when I was overseas, I would see like things hanging off the wires, or it might possibly be an ID in a pothole. And the things that were in the wires, a lot of times it became a line of sight. And my way my brain would work, even now, and I wasn't able to articulate it up until like a few years ago, it would just be like, oh, and then I'll start getting more anxious. And what I do now is say, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. And then the anxiety or that level of heightened arousal goes away.
Okay.
And when I think about, so I look at my dad in different periods. And when I got older, like I'll tell you, my dad drove out to Parasite to watch me graduate boot camp. I am extremely grateful of my father when he was older, but I also don't believe he had the mental or emotional capabilities when I was younger to do it.
Hmm.
And I can actually say the father I disliked when I was younger, the father I loved when I was older. and being able to, going to not be too biblical, hate the sin but love the sinner. And I've learned that about different people in my life where it's, these are your choices. I can still love you for you, and I can still see that these are faults. And I was talking about this actually in one of the groups that I run, or actually co-facilitate over at the VA, and how faults are opportunities for us to grow. Just like post-traumatic stress, there's also post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
There is, when we allow ourselves to be able to feel in these emotions, it allows us to unlock those emotions that have been emotionally stunted. It was a chaplain to help me understand that there's no such thing as a negative emotion, it's just emotions. And when I started to allow myself to cry or grieve certain events,
Mm.
it allowed like this whole new complexity of emotions. And I wasn't able to really give my full self to other people because I was stuck more in fragments of time. I'm still stuck in certain fragments of time and I'm working through it. But trying to be in love with somebody and not being able to give them full love because I didn't know how to grieve these type of stresses. I didn't know how to understand it. And like a lot of stuff happens when we're children, where especially in the masculine world, we're just supposed to move on. If you're able to process what happened, you can move on a lot faster.
Yeah, the norm as a guy is to try to stuff it down or move past it. And I think, especially with kind of the just emotional pain that I felt towards my dad, that was just a very unproductive way of trying to deal with it because it, of course, would resurface. Like I'd lash out in anger at my brother or something like that. And thankfully, it was never a case of where I came close to like doing him harm or anything, or even like fracturing my relationship with him. But it's just a way in which I can be aware of like, oh, this is going to have a negative impact on my life now if I don't work through this in a more productive way.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, for instance, you go into college and you're getting your bachelor's degree. It
Mhm.
actually helps like strengthen your resiliency or strengthens it helps you delay the id. And like the marshmallow test talks all about. Are you familiar with the study by any chance?
Is that with children and
It
delaying
is.
gratification?
So it's about delaying gratification,
Yeah.
and it took Stanford professor kids. And you got to think, Stanford professors, they're going to be talking probably pretty educated around the kids. They're going to
Mhm.
talk about delaying, they're going to do a lot of things, and they're going to be role modeling this with the kids.
Okay.
And what they did was they asked these kids, like, what is the thing that they really enjoy? Skittles, marshmallows, whatever. But it was coined marshmallow because it was just a nice umbrella way of looking at it. And the kids that were able to delay the instant gratification, they were able to, when they followed them through through high school, college, and relationships,
Mm.
they had healthy relationships. They had less likely for divorce. They had higher academic scores. They had a lot of things that were in what we consider a positive spectrum. The
Okay.
ones that had the negative, or the ones that were more instant gratificated, they actually had less scores, they had more problems, and they had more issues. Then they took it the same type of perspective, and they're like, "Hey, can we teach this?" And they took it. It was either into inner city of Chicago or inner city of New York, but I believe it was New York, and they were using it with teenagers, and they were able to teach it to people to delay the instant gratification. And they're able to keep going forward. Um, and they're able to have better lives than their other counterparts. Like as what they say, the stereotypical way of like higher education, more money, more items, better relationships, less controversy. And if you look at Angela Duckworth's perspective of the book Grit that she wrote, she talks about when people are more grittier, they have better lives. They're able to be able to handle stress a little bit differently. They're able to be able to process things. So when you're looking at it from those type of angles, you're able to sit in that discomforting emotion for a lot longer of a period of time without needing to respond or react or try to relieve that type of uh, say stressful moment. Because like I was sharing with you before, was stress is no good, no bad. It is just what it is, and it's the way that you process it. If I leave you with a bunch of candy and you really love candy, you're going to be like, huh, I'll either have this bag of sour Skittles now,
Yeah.
or if I wait and she comes back, I get two bags.
Like, yeah, as a child, I don't think I would have been the delayed gratification side of things. I probably would have eaten the marshmallow right then. But it's funny because I think about it now, and I think we talked a few months ago about how the last like 2 years I've found the carnivore diet to be very helpful for me.
Yeah,
But I'm a complete sweet tooth. Like if I have one piece of candy at work, I will want to go and like grab the whole bowl of Skittles or
hmm
Snickers bars or whatever and eat them all in one sitting. It's like I just have to cut all of that out of my life because there's very little regulation that I can have there.
yeah. Some people are all or nothing,
Yeah.
but it's interesting because like the girl I'm saying, she left me some sour airheads, and they were freeze dried, and I went through the whole thing real quick, and I was like,
I shouldn't have done that.
no,
Like it's always afterwards when you're feeling terrible
no,
and
I was like, I'm so happy I did that. I'm
you,
so happy.
you thought that.
Yeah, but then I'm like, I just won't have any more for a
Yeah.
while. That's okay.
Yeah.
But no, it's an interesting way of looking at how our childhood actually develops us.
Hmm.
But what other people, or one of the things I'm trying to emphasize on, is when we start to decouple or defrag ourselves from certain parts of our own using computer mentality, we're able to have more bandwidth for everything else around us. And it doesn't mean that since you didn't have that emotional or impulse regulation as a kid, doesn't mean that you can't learn that now. And just because you're 27, a 30-year-old man, or a 40-year-old man, a 50-year-old man, doesn't mean that you have to live on autopilot all the way up until the end of your life. You can choose to redesign it, like request it.
Oh yeah. Like, the carnivore diet is maybe kind of a good example of that because, prior to 2 years ago, I hadn't tried it, and I'd heard a lot of good things about it from some other folks out there, mainly on the internet, because there's not a whole lot of people I've met actually in person now who do it. It's kind of uncommon, but for me, it was really helpful because I think just the aspect of trimming out the foods that tend to be like least helpful
hmm
and then eating a lot of what your body can easily use and
hmm
like build proteins and everything like that. It was very helpful for kind of the latter stage of the recovery that I had from the injury, brain injury, but then also for me, like as a distance runner, it's actually been really helpful because I can, have a higher mileage week and actually not be that sore at the end of it. Like right now building up for a couple of marathon races this fall. Um, this will by far be kind of the highest mileage I will have done ever as a runner this summer. But it's actually, I'm not actually that sore very often. So it's almost like kind of rediscovering like, oh, my body operates better eating mostly meat. Like, discovering something new about myself just a couple of years ago.
Do you notice that you're not having the lactic acid built up from the carbohydrates being synthesized?
So it's interesting because my body still does burn glycogen, like stored glucose
hmm
that it stores in muscle tissue and the liver, etc. But it's actually glucose that my body synthesizes. The body can synthesize glucose on its own. So, like, even if I were to eat zero sugar, like only eat meat, which I sometimes have done like pure carnivore. Right now I'm more on like it's called like animal based where they do incorporate some fruit in
Mm.
there. I'm not quite sure where the term came from because fruit isn't from animals, obviously, but um,
Well, we are living in the accuracy world right now, but go
yeah,
on.
yeah. So probably currently for me, it's more the like animal-based variety where it's mostly meat and some fruit. And the fruit aspect almost for me kind of just adds more flavor,
Hmm.
definitely more the sweet side of flavor. But I mean, it's mostly meat, like probably 90% of my calories are from meat, most of it beef. So, um, definitely atypical as a runner. Like most distance runners are carb fueled. Like they will carb load before a workout, before a race. Like they have to eat a lot during a race, even.
Hmm.
And for me, actually, I did two marathons so far this year. The first one I did eat a little bit of like the gel, like running gel,
Yep.
during the race, and I didn't really notice much of a boost that that actually gave me during the race. So the second marathon I did, I actually didn't load at all. Like I had water, but like no gel or anything, and I actually did better without loading. And there were some other like variables that probably affected that, but at least for me, I didn't notice a huge difference between like eating anything during the race versus not. So I tend to like as a distance runner operate differently than most other distance runners where they're having to like carb load a lot prior to the race and then eat a lot during the race to keep going.
Hmm.
It's nice not to have to do that.
Well, you're only running 26.2 miles.
Yeah.
Uh, I yeah, I will definitely say I appreciate your insight on all that stuff. It's been a pleasure because what was interesting is while we were having this dialogue, I don't know if you felt this way, but we wanted to go talk about the TBI and recovery. But I will definitely say the more I listened to you, it was more impressionable about your younger years than you were as an adult.
Okay.
I don't know if you felt that way.
Yeah. I mean, in some regards, maybe a lot of what we talked about was earlier in my life,
Hmm.
like not as much in recent years, because of course after the TBI, I went on to graduate college and then work where I met you, at MDT originally, and then
Yeah.
2 years since then, a different engineering job.
So
So,
you're like uber bright, and I'm super pumped
mm,
about hearing about what's going on with
yeah,
everything. But we have to hit up another symphony sometime
yeah,
soon.
yeah,
And you're looking great, by the way, man. I would love to be able to put as much resources that I could as time resources into running.
yeah.
But
You should take it up.
I probably
I
will.
think you'd get into it, get into the marathon distance.
I've only ran one marathon in my
Okay,
life. I've rocked a marathon with a 45-pound pack.
okay,
I've done multiple halves.
okay.
Um, but right now, I will tell you, I'm making one of the biggest excuses: full-time school, full-time work, trying to take
Yeah,
care of a dog,
yeah,
do a podcast, and have healthy relationships.
yeah.
And I'm looking forward to spending a little bit more time in the gym or actually doing some physical activities, not even just in the gym. I think that's the other thing. I need to focus on doing not just a routine. My
Hmm.
brain doesn't work so much. It helps with the routine, but I need more. Uh,
Okay.
but yeah, Logan, it was a pleasure to talk with you, man.
Yeah, Will, great to talk with you.
Oh,